The Adventures of Pinocchio, based on Carlo Collodi. Shadow Art Studio, Landi. The Creation of Pinocchio by Geppetto the Carpenter. Once a kind and poor old carpenter, Geppetto, carved a puppet from a magical log of wood and named it Pinocchio. Suddenly, the puppet's eyes opened, and it looked straight at Geppetto. Geppetto was astonished. When he carved the nose, it strangely grew and grew. Finally, the mouth began to move. It laughed and stuck its tongue out at Geppetto. "This puppet is alive?" Geppetto exclaimed in wonder. As soon as he carved the arms and legs, Geppetto stood Pinocchio up to teach him how to walk. Pinocchio laughed, hopped, ran around the room, and knocked everything down. "Father, I can already walk!" Pinocchio cried out and suddenly ran into the street. Geppetto rushed after him to catch him. People watched in amazement at the running wooden puppet. Suddenly, a carabinier blocked the street. He grabbed Pinocchio by the nose and handed him to Geppetto. To teach Pinocchio a lesson, Geppetto grabbed him by the collar and, shaking his head angrily, tried to take him home. Pinocchio did not obey Geppetto. He lay down on the ground and would not move. The curious and idle crowd thought that old Geppetto was mistreating the boy, so they made the carabinier let Pinocchio go while Geppetto was arrested. The Talking Cricket and Pinocchio. Having returned home alone, he was met by the Talking Cricket, who had lived in that house for more than 100 years. The cricket tried to give Pinocchio some advice. Woe to those children who disobey their parents and leave home because of their whims. They will never find good fortune in this world, and sooner or later they will bitterly regret it. If I stay, the same thing will happen to me as to other children. They will send me to school, and whether I like it or not, I will have to study." Pinocchio replied. All Pinocchio cared for was eating, drinking, and wandering around all day long. Poor Pinocchio, I truly pity you, because you are a puppet, and what's worse, a block-headed puppet, the cricket said. At these words, Pinocchio grew angry, grabbed a hammer, and struck the cricket on the head. The poor cricket gave its last sigh and remained stuck against the wall. The Marionette Theatre and Puppeteer Fire Eater. Having returned from prison, Geppetto sold his old patched-up cotton jacket, and with the money bought Pinocchio a spelling book, so that he could go to school. On his way to school, Pinocchio came across a marionette theatre. He sold the spelling book to buy a ticket to the show. Pinocchio's entrance into the theatre caused great joy among the puppets. Harlequin and Pulcinella greeted him happily on stage, and the performance was interrupted. Infuriated by this, the puppeteer Fire Eater, with his enormous black beard and fearsome appearance, decided to light a fire to prepare Pinocchio for dinner. Terrified, Pinocchio burst into tears, remembered his father Geppetto, and begged for help. His sincere weeping softened the puppeteer's heart, and he decided to bring out Harlequin instead of Pinocchio. Pinocchio wet Fire Eater's enormous beard with his tears to persuade him to spare Harlequin as well. Despite his outward harshness, Fire Eater was kind at heart and pardoned Harlequin too. Overjoyed, the puppets rushed onto the stage as if it were a festive performance. Fire Eater gave Pinocchio 5 gold coins and sent him off to Geppetto. Delighted, Pinocchio thanked the puppeteer, said farewell to the puppets, and sent off happily for home. The Trick of the Fox and the Cat, the Field of Wonders. On the way, Pinocchio met 2 swindlers, the fox and the cat. Pinocchio told them about his 5 gold coins and pulled the money Fire Eater had given him out into the daylight. At the pleasant jingle of the coins, the fox forgot his limp and straightened the leg he pretended was lame, while the cat, blind in pretense, flashed both green eyes wide, then shut them again. They were persuading Pinocchio that if he planted the coins in the field of miracles, the tree would grow and produce hundreds of gold coins. Pinocchio trusted them and followed along. On the way they stopped to rest at the inn called the Red Crawfish. After dinner, Pinocchio fell asleep, and the swindlers slipped out quietly from the inn. Pinocchio woke up and found that the fox and the cat had snuck away. He had no choice but to pay for the inn with his own coins and continue alone toward the field of miracles. In the forest, Pinocchio came across with 2 bandits covered with sacks, who were really the fox and the cat. Frightened, Pinocchio hid the coins in his mouth, ran and climbed up a tree. The bandits tried to catch him, but Pinocchio jumped off the tree and ran off again. At dawn, the bandits caught him. In response to his refusal to open his mouth and give up the coins, they tied his hands behind his back, forced his head into a noose, and left him hanging from an oak tree, hoping that when they returned the next day, they would find him dead and with his mouth open. Pinocchio felt death approaching. He thought of his father Geppetto, whispered his name, and fell silent. Pinocchio wakes in the house of the blue-haired fairy. At that moment appeared a kind fairy with blue hair, who had lived near the forest for more than 1,000 years. Filled with pity, the fairy gently clapped her hands 3 times and ordered a falcon to cut Pinocchio down and bring him to her house. Invited doctors established that Pinocchio was alive, and the fairy began to nurse him back to health. When he recovered, the fairy asked Pinocchio where the coins he had saved from the bandits were. Pinocchio lied and said he had lost them in the forest, though in truth he had them hidden in his pocket. With every new lie, his nose grew longer and longer, until it was so big he could not move. The fairy watched, laughed, and finally said that there are short-legged lies and long-nosed lies, and Pinocchio was exactly a long-nosed liar. Pinocchio's regret for his actions and his long crying softened the fairy's heart. She clapped her hands, and thousands of woodpeckers landed on Pinocchio's nose. They pecked at it, and in a few minutes restored it to its natural size. The fairy told Pinocchio that this time she would forgive him, and if he earned it by not lying, studying hard at school, being diligent and obedient, she would turn him into a real boy. Overjoyed, Pinocchio promised to become a good child and bring comfort to his father. He thanked the fairy and set out for the forest to return to Geppetto. The Land of Toys and the Transformation into a Donkey. On the road, Pinocchio met a lazy and mischievous boy named Lucinolo, who told him about the land of toys, a place where there is no school, only children live there, and joy forever reigns there. Despite the promise he had given to the fairy, Pinocchio gave in to temptation, and together with Lucinolo followed the little coachman to the land of toys in a cart pulled by donkeys. The little coachman was as soft and greasy as a ball of butter. His cheeks were red, and he always had a smile on his face. With his thin, caressing voice, he won the hearts of mischievous boys at first sight. After 5 months of endless fun in the land of toys, one morning Pinocchio and Lucinolo discovered that they had turned into donkeys. Their ears had grown long, their arms and legs had become hooves, their faces had turned into snouts, and hair and tails had grown on their backs. Horrified, they began to cry and bray. They were overwhelmed with shame. The satisfied little coachman put bridles on the boys and led them to market to sell. Lucinolo was bought by a peasant, and Pinocchio by a circus director, who wanted to train him as a performing donkey to do difficult tricks. One day, Pinocchio fell during a performance and broke his leg. Useless now, he was sold to a new owner, a man who needed Pinocchio's skin for the drums of the village orchestra. The new owner hung a heavy stone around Pinocchio's neck, tied a rope to his leg, and threw him off the cliff into the sea to drown so that he could use his skin. Pinocchio in the belly of the whale and the rescue of Geppetto. Fish began to eat Pinocchio's donkey skin as he sank. When they reached the wooden body underneath, they realized it wasn't edible and swam away. Pinocchio turned back into a puppet. Out at sea, he spotted a tiny goatling standing on a rock, with fur as bright as the hair of the blue-haired fairy. The goatling called out to Pinocchio, warning him of a whale approaching. Pinocchio tried to swim to the rock, but it was too late. The whale swallowed him whole. Inside the whale's belly, trapped, Pinocchio wept and cried out for help. Then, in the distance, he noticed a faint light. He crept closer and saw a little table set with some fish, a burned candle stuck in a green bottle, and beside it, the weakened old Geppetto. The whale had swallowed Geppetto when he had gone out to sea in search of Pinocchio. With joy, the boy cried out, stretched out his arms, and threw them around the old man's neck. Geppetto could hardly believe his eyes that this was his beloved Pinocchio. The boy begged forgiveness and promised never to leave him again, that he would save him and bring him home. Together, they began to plan their escape from the asthmatic and open-mouthed whale's stomach. Pinocchio lifted the weakened Geppetto onto his back, and after several attempts, managed to leap into the water through the whale's open mouth. Geppetto and Pinocchio swam toward the shore. Pinocchio's transformation into a real boy. Having survived the whale, Pinocchio and Geppetto noticed a straw hut on their way, where the talking cricket lived. Although Pinocchio had got rid of him with a hammer before, the cricket welcomed them anyway, because the blue-haired goatling had gifted him this hut. Pinocchio realized that the goatling was the blue-haired fairy. He apologized to the cricket and promised to always follow his advice. Following the cricket's advice, Pinocchio began working for the neighboring farmer, Johnny, to earn money for milk and pay for Geppetto's care. He worked for more than 5 months. With his own hands, he made a neat little cart to carry Geppetto in the fresh air. And in the evenings, he studied reading and writing. One day, with the 40 coins he had earned from his hard work, Pinocchio decided to go to the market and buy clothes. On the way, he met a snail, who told him that the blue-haired fairy was gravely ill and didn't even have money for food. Concerned, Pinocchio gave the snail all 40 coins to take to the fairy. That night, the fairy appeared to Pinocchio in a dream. She kissed him and told him that because of his kind heart, she forgave all his mistakes and would turn him into a real boy. At that moment, Pinocchio woke up. He looked in the mirror, and instead of a wooden puppet, he saw a beautiful, smiling boy with chestnut hair. Overjoyed, he ran to the next room, where he found Geppetto healthy and cheerful. Then he looked at the tall wooden puppet whose head was thrown to the side and said, "What a funny puppet I was, and how happy I am now that I have become a good child." Moral: lies, laziness, and disobedience teach a person wisdom the hard way. Yet sincerity, diligence, kindness, and love make a person truly human. Just as Pinocchio transformed from a wooden puppet into a real boy, so too will every child who is honest and caring grow into a dignified and kind-hearted person.